Good evening. My name is Summer and I'm a real alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendiums. The Spiritual Life is Not a Theory, our Friday night Big Book study. Tonight we have the amazing Paige F. She is here. I've known Paige for probably 3.5, almost 4 years now. And I met her through speaker seeking and we became friends, and I've just grown to just love her big book studies, love her as a person, and just I'm so honored to have her here with me tonight. So I just wanted to pump it up because I think that she's amazing, and it's going to be awesome. If you want to introduce yourself as well, Paige, and
Yeah, sure, Paige alcoholic, and love you too.
all right. Okay, so we are diving right in. And I know for those of you who were here last Friday, we did read this chapter and study it with David G. But we're going to just back it up and do it one more time because I think it kind of helps if those of you who were not here. We've been doing We Agnostics. This is our third week, and this is page 4. So that's about the speed that we go. All right, so I'm just gonna get started, and then I'm going to ask Paige for some insight as well, and we're going to roll. All right. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him, that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. All right, so I feel like that's a must, right? Like that's like we must ask ourselves with one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe? Or I like to say, am I willing to be willing to be willing to believe, right? And then it's onward. It's like once we are willing, we have that willingness in action, and we can answer these questions, it's on. Like, let's go, right? Like it says, as soon, that's now. Like as soon, like come on, like let's go. As a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we assure him that he's on his way. I like to assure my sponsees once they say these things, let's go, we're on our way. Awesome job. So, Paige, do you have anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I love, for me, this is step two, part one of, is it cool if I do the screen share thing that I was going to do?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sweet. Alrighty. I got to make sure I screen share the right thing because we're all over the place. And I'm in the way a little, so I'll scooch. Uh, but this is step two, and this is, for me, step two, part one. So step two, as it's written on page 59, it says, came to believe that. Not even came to believe in, but came to believe that a capital P power greater than ourselves. And that goes on to say, could restore us to sanity. Step one, or step two, part one is this. Can I believe that there is a power greater than myself? And that's this question right here. Step two, part one, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? The bar for entry on this is so low. It's so low, in fact, that I just believed that alcoholism or addiction or my compulsive whatever behavior brings you to this study today is a power greater than myself. So all I need to believe is that maybe there could be another, I don't need to believe in. I don't need to fully understand or comprehend or define. In fact, it would be impossible for me to do so in the second step. But can I believe? And what this often looks like is, can I believe that those sober, happy alcoholics and addicts in the meetings have better things to do on a Friday night than lie about their experience of God and lie about their spiritual experience? I like to point to other people because I feel like me having hobbies or spare time is like not like people like, nah, you don't got anything better to do, Paige. You could be lying about it. Um, so for me, and just because I won't be here by the time, well, actually, I don't know. It might take you a while to get there, and maybe you'll have me back. I don't know. But no pressure. The second part of step two is that power could restore me to sanity. And I take that question from page 53. What is bigger, God or my alcoholism, right? God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? And one of the things I want to point out, can I believe this power can relieve me of the mental obsession? And I don't want to break down God is everything or else God is nothing right now too much, but just real quickly, what I will say is that if I have had any experiences where I am alive and sober today only by seconds and inches, I am alive and sober today despite my own will to not be. If I have any experiences in my life of the nearness of God, the feeling of oneness with something, holding a newborn in your and looking at them in their eyes and being enchanted by that moment, to have that moment looking at the sunset in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, or to have the ocean waves and to be in that moment. If I've had any moments of that, I cannot say God is not. And I must say God is. And if I say God is, then God must be everything. And so at this point, all I'm just believing is there could be a power greater than myself. And I love, as you said, I'm going to assure you with emphasis. Now, I've been told that I am not wanting on emphasis. I emphasize quite a bit with my enthusiasm. I've gotten that feedback before. I can't tone it down. If I could, I probably would. This is how this is. But I love that this is a cornerstone. And the cornerstone is what the building is symbolically built upon, not the foundation, but the symbolic upon which the symbolic stone which is laid upon which a building is built. But I want to emphasize at this moment on page 47, nothing has been built. And if you're here and we're at the second step and we're like, man, I don't know God, I don't feel connected with God, I feel this confusion. It's like, yes. We're at step 2. We're just believing, could we build a structure? The structure has not been built yet. But what I want to point out is, if anyone here ever grew up with Winnie the Pooh, I think about Eeyore. Now, actually, if you're struggling with belief in the power of God, people would call me Eeyore. Not because of a horse face, and I'm not being self-deprecating. It was because of my negativity. I was so negative and miserable. I'm somebody that could suck the energy right out of a room. That's who I know. If you're like, what? I have a friend that said, Paige, you're the most negative and miserable person that I have ever met. That's me, right? Can we believe that I'm not that person anymore, right? But when I think about a wonderfully effective spiritual structure, I think about Eeyore and his little shack of sticks that kept falling over. That's not what I'm looking to build. I get to build, and it can be whatever you want. You could build a cathedral. And if you're like, oh, no, that sounds too much like religion. No, but you can build an incredibly effective structure, the most beautiful building inside yourself that you could possibly think. But it just starts with this idea, could there be a power greater than myself? So that's all I'll say about that.
Awesome. And I love your enthusiasm. So I'm all about it. I think it's great. All right. So there's that little star, and it says this, the asterisk. Please be sure to read Appendix 2 on spiritual experience. So dun dun dun. Here we go. We're gonna be page 567. For everyone that has their big book, if you want to turn with us, because we will be parking there for a little bit. It's 2 pages. So it's Appendix 2, spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many forms. Paige?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I would always take from that is, for me, spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, and throwing in some other language like fourth dimension, entire psychic change, they are synonyms of each other. Now, there are people, and I'm not like, listen, there are some pedantic hills that upon which I will die. I will die on that hill. This is not that hill. I don't care. There are some people, though, that feel that the spiritual experience is more of a what happened to Bill Wilson, that white light spiritual experience. An awakening is an experience that happens a little more gradually. And if you're somebody that believes that, wonderful, you're right. And if you're somebody that says, no, they're purely, simply, and only synonyms, wonderful, you're right. That's not the point of this. But also, as we get into this, one of the things that I know to be true for me, and this is my experience, is I could not stay well on one drink. I did not ever once have one hoot of crack and think, why, that was a sufficient hoot of crack, I am done. I needed more. You know what I mean? I needed more. And my experience is I can't stay well on one spiritual experience. So if I am, trying to argue it's an experience or this or that, it's like, who cares? I need more. I need to grow them. So I think that's what I want to say. And what I will say is that's our solution actually in 12 step. The solution that I'm after in 12 step is a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience. And they might look a little bit different for everyone, and that is okay. But we have a common, while the experience itself might be a little different, there are some elements that are similar, but we have a common program of action. We have a common way to get from the hopelessness of my illness to the solution that is the spiritual experience. You didn't think I could talk that long in such a short paragraph. I could keep going. I will not, though. I will shut up. Thank you.
You can keep going. That was awesome. That was perfect. You just covered it awesome. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. Paige just talked about that. That must be in the nature of a sudden and spectacular upheaval. That's in reference to Bill Wilson's white light experience. It doesn't have to be that. Happily for all of us, because not all of us have that white light experience. Not all of us have that big boom or anything like that. So it's erroneous, meaning that's not the truth. That's not always the truth. It can be the truth, but it doesn't mean it has to be. Paige?
Absolutely. And because we're going to speak a little about William James and varieties of religious experiences in this. And I didn't know we were talking about this. I am a bit of a nerd, and I really enjoy that book, which kind of tells you that I am not fun at parties. Oh, why, yes, let's have a read of William James varieties. It's known for being very dry and very uninteresting. And I'm like, oh, yes. I'm on my second reading of about halfway through. But Bill Wilson had his white light spiritual experience. And in Varieties of Religious Experiences, it talks about experiences of luminous phenomena, which is to say his type of spiritual awakening was one that is defined. Like people had experiences like this. And yes, we might not have, especially, yes, welcome, glad you're here, everyone who just joined. If you put things in the chat, I'll go on tangents. I can't stop myself. But I can't stay well on one experience. And I always like to point this out. I not once in my life sold the power of alcohol short. There wasn't a time in my life that I did not come to alcohol, absolutely convinced it would solve whatever problem I bring to it. I didn't come to my life skeptical of the power of crack cocaine or whatever pill I was taking. You know what I mean? I came with faith. And here's my experience. I don't get to decide the experience that I have. And I have had really powerful experiences. So I'm reminded not to sell the power of God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, or the power of 12 steps short, and to continue to seek. So that's just my thing. I get a little like, yeah, we can have white light ones. It'd be rad, yeah.
I'm with you there. I still have faith that I'm going to have one. All right. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. You want to comment on that? I think it goes right with what you were saying.
Yes, and the only thing that I would say is like when we talk about what a spiritual experience is, I love going through the book and finding sneaky descriptions of spiritual experiences or sneaky prayers or sneaky promises or sneaky anything, because that's how my silly little brain works. But what I want to do is like if we're worried about the sudden and or immediate and overwhelming, just take that out. And what is an element of a spiritual awakening? A God consciousness, followed by a vast change in feeling and outlook. So take away the time frame, although again, we can get well very quickly. God consciousness and man, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go on this little tangent. The word conscience is Latin in origin. Who invited Paige? It was summer. It was a last minute thing, so I am the bottom of the barrel. We can hear the scraping. No, I'm just kidding. But the conscious, it's Latin in origin, and con means with, and shus or sire means knowing. So it is an internal with knowing of God. And I always love to tell this story about Carl Jung. There's this famous BBC interview of Dr. Carl Jung. And in it, they ask him, growing up, did you believe in God? And he says, yes. Growing up, I believed in God. Then they said, do you believe in God now? And he says, no. And there's a pause. And he says, I've got no need for belief. And there's a pause. And he says, I know. That's what I'm after. That deep level knowing. At step 2, we agnostics, it's Greek, egg without, and gnosis is knowledge, that heart level knowing. I'm starting with belief, but what I'm trying to develop is a experience, a with knowing, a heart level knowing of this power. And what happens? We get that new pair of glasses, as Chuck Chamberlain would do a talk and then write a book on. I see the world in a radically different way. And as a result, I feel in a radically different way. So that's what I was going to say. Just a quick little commentary. It's like, girl.
It's great. It's great. I love hearing you. Okay. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the educational variety because they develop slowly over a period of time. So the educational variety is basically, where it happens over, it says it over a period of time. It's like a sanctification process. Like it keeps getting better and better, and or like little experiences, and then you have an experience on top of an experience, and this experience refers to the last experience you have, and you just, the majority of us do have an educational variety. Correct, Paige?
Well, and I am just going to be not actually controversial because I need you all to love me. Love me. Thank you. And if you don't, that's fine. That's what inventory is for. I'll have a look at me because it's clearly a me problem. But I've had a look and I could not find, now I definitely could not find the phrase educational variety in varieties of religious experience. And actually I was in a meeting and somebody messaged me, somebody who knows that I'm a giant nerd, and was like, did you know educational variety isn't actually in varieties of religious experiences? And so that's what got me to read it, if you're wondering. Like, if you're trying to get somebody to do something, it's like you just tell them it's not in there, and it's like, oh, I gotta find out. And I will say, so William James's book, it's really a series of talks that were transcribed, but he's studying these powerful spiritual experiences, but he does talk about ones that's called gradual conversion. So it happens a little more slowly. Now, what I will say is in those gradual conversions, it happens over the course of weeks rather than in an instant. But here's the thing, when we talk about the educational variety, what often happens is we see that, or at least I've found that people see that and think that means intellectual variety. I'm trying to get there through here, and I can't get to a spiritual awakening through my head. I have to get to a spiritual awakening through experience. If I say through my heart, and if you're like me when I came here, it's like, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do things through my heart, Paige. Shut up and I hate you, which is needlessly aggressive. We'll write some inventory on me. It's fine. But that idea, like, I have to get there through experience. I can't think my way to a spiritual awakening. I have to take the actions that allow me to have that spiritual awakening. So I think that's sort of where we get tripped up a little too, like, trying to think through the steps or try to think through the actions. The other thing that I want to say about the educational variety, or it happens slowly, what I want to say is if it takes me a very long time to work through the steps, Just like, now bear with me, if it took me a long time to have 6 beers, I'm not going to have the same effect as if I slam back 6 beers. I'm using that as not the best metaphor, but it's a metaphor most of us can relate to. You know what I'm saying? So if I try to avoid doing the steps, if I take a long time to make my amends, if I sit on my 4th step, I might not get that same impact and effect that if I worked it quickly and thoroughly. So that's just what I want to say about that. Like, sometimes it's like, oh, take your time. And it's like, no, it's a race. I'm not racing you. I'm racing the inevitability of the first drink or the inevitability of the first drug. That's what I'm racing. I'm not racing you, but it is a race. So that's what I was going to say.
That's a great analogy. That makes complete sense. All right. Quite often friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. I want to hear from you, Paige, because this is packed. So I want to hear from you, and then I'll comment after.
Absolutely. So for me, what I see is 4 descriptions of what a spiritual experience looks like. The first one is a profound alteration in his reaction to life. So how I react, how I show up to life has been altered, and profound is like the depth, right? And like in a deep way, how I show up to life is radically different. For example, not flipping people off in traffic. Now, if you're not there yet, that's okay. But that, for some of us, is a profound alteration in our reaction to life. This is the second quality, that it could not have been brought about by himself alone. I can't do it. I want to be clear. I have to take the actions of the steps. That is what I do, and that is what gets me there. But I don't create the spiritual experience. I do the work to put me in a position to receive or awaken to the spiritual experience. 3, this is the third, that what happens in a few months could not have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. Again, it does not take long. A few months is actually, it's the longest description of how long it takes to get well in the book, with the exception being in the doctor's opinion when it talks about Hank Parkhurst, the first guy who had the gastric hemorrhage and it would seem to be a pathological case of mental deterioration. He said, I saw him a year later. It did not take Hank a year to work the steps, but we're seeing a few months is the longest. You know what I mean? Abby Thatcher, 2 months sober. You know what I'm saying? It does not take Bill, a couple days, does not take long to get well. So I wanted to point that out, like, hey, we can go through this thing quickly. 4. So with few exceptions, which means that most of us, this description, have tapped an unsuspected inner resource. And you'll notice, oh, no, we didn't get to that yet, but it says deep down within at the end of the doctor's opinion, page 55, deep down within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God within. Another place that we can look is 25. It says, the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous, as in my heart within. There's this idea that there is a power within. It is not me, but it is within me. I'm tapping into this power. So those are the 4 descriptions. Now, I found these, Wikipedia, if you're wondering where I got it, but these 4 descriptions of a spiritual experience from William James himself. And these are going to be big, wordy words that I use regularly because I'm a giant weirdo. So these are his descriptions, which I think are great. You can be like, they are not great and you're lame, and that is fair. But we're really judging me today. What's that about? Just show up and tease. All right. So the first is that a quality of a spiritual experience is that it is ineffable. And to be ineffable is something that needs to be experienced, to be understood. So for example, try to explain to somebody the scent of a rose. Or talking about the newborn, the smell on a newborn baby's head. Describe that. You know what I'm saying? Describe it. And how do we describe it? Well, you'd have to say, describe the color red, describe a summer breeze. You'd have to say, it is like, it feels like. Just like how in we agnostics, it's full of metaphors, because I need metaphors to explain something that can only be experienced. And that's what I'm after, an experience. And that says noetic. And what to be noetic is to reveal divine truths that I could not know otherwise. I don't want to go on too long, but I've had these profound experiences, spiritual experiences, and some of the things that were noetic in my experience was like, I'm not a piece of garbage. Like, I couldn't have known that any other way. Like, I remember I was a former sponsee was calling me, and she was filled with gratitude. She was sober, and family members were getting sober, and her life was becoming restored. And she was calling me with tears of gratitude. That doesn't happen that often, and that's okay. The gratitude, I'm just season. And what I said, and it wasn't me that said it. You know, when words come out, and I didn't say that, I didn't have that thought. What I said was, everything good in me is God. Everything good in me is God. And I don't mean that. I have been self-deprecating today. I will own that. That's on me. That's my bad. But I did not mean that in a negative, self-deprecating way. I meant that in everything good in me is God. You know, that was my experience. I couldn't have known that in any other way. Because you could read or you can listen to that and you can think, oh, I roll, that doesn't apply to me, because that's what I was like. And then the experience itself is transient. So it comes and it passes, but the effects of it remain. There are often lingering effects. Now, in Varieties of Religious Experience, he talks about people who've had what he describes as religious experiences. Very rarely do they go into backsliding. And that would be the phrase that he would use. And very few would ever then turn on faith and say, no, there's no power. Like, that is something that just is incredibly rare in all of the spiritual experiences that he studied. That even though, that we don't feel lifted up on a mountaintop 24/7, 365, we do get to spend a lot of time there, and the effects of that remain. So, and the other is this passivity. There's an element of passivity, which what that means is I don't make it happen. It happens to me. I do the work and it happens. And like, if you've ever worked with somebody or you've been this person, get well despite yourself, you take some actions, you make some amends, and you're like, oh, I'm full of joy. How did that happen? You know what I mean? I didn't do it. I could not produce joy in my life. So that was a little thing. And over to you, Summer.
That was excellent. Thank you. That was awesome. I don't think I have anything else to say. That was, yeah, that was awesome. I'm going to ask you a question. Remind me to at the end about the first one. Okay. So most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. Quote, there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. All right, Paige, I want to,
Oh, good.
you're on fire. I want to hear.
Absolutely. And I love it's like most emphatically with emphasis. Like, we're trying to that any, and that's any of us. And of course, it's going to say alcoholic. This is all inclusive. Anyone here today who's at this meeting, at this study, or anyone who is listening to the recording, anyone who is capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience. This is an experience-based book, can recover. We can recover. And we kind of see that on page 58, 59, right? How it works, we get into kind of how it works, and it's rarely have we seen a person fail. It would be rare to mess this up. I mean, the 12 steps have to be alcoholic proof, but the problem is so many of us don't do it or avoid doing it. And we can recover so long as I stay open, like don't close my mind to all spiritual concepts, which means I just have a little bit of open-mindedness. And I love that the only thing that can defeat me is an attitude. It is an attitude of intolerant or belligerent denial. Nope. And what does that look like? Nope, that can't work for me. Nope, that can't help me. Nope, I haven't done it. Now we're going to talk about this in the not quite Herbert Spencer quote. Rob knows what's coming. The not quite Herbert Spencer quote. But like, what will defeat me is I know it won't work, but I haven't tried. Welcome, Howard. Glad you're here. He tried to get it like sneaky and like not get it. Yeah. And so what we're talking about is an attitude. That is what can defeat me. And isn't that true? Like in our experience, maybe our own personal experience, the attitude of this can't work for me. A 4-step won't help. I can't get the God thing, but I haven't taken the actions to get there. And I love that it says no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Now, obviously, if I'm such a freaking nerd that I'm my casual light reading, I don't have hard reading. And I want you guys to know it's audiobooks because I don't read well anymore. But if I'm casually like at the airport listening to varieties of religious experiences and having a great time, I'm a weirdo, and I will own that. And so what that kind of means is I do a lot of spiritual seeking from a variety of faith traditions. I seek because it's just like I sought the next drink. Can't say, well, on one experience. I seek because it works. I seek because it's great. And here's the thing is somebody who has, and again, always rooted and grounded in the fundamental actions of these 12 steps. I've never left. But here's what I found. If it is healthy spirituality, you'll find it anywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? Don't leave. Like, that's all I'm saying. But if it is this God-given healthy spirituality, I will find it in all my spiritual seeking. I'll find it in some of the spiritual teachers that are mentioned in varieties of religious experience, which got me like absolutely jazzercised about it because it tied some things together that I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Anywho, and when it talks about willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are essentials, but when it says these are indispensable, man, I can't go without these. You know what I mean? Indispensable. I need these. I need to be a little bit honest that I have this problem, that I need help, a little bit open to the idea that there could be a solution, and a willingness. Now it's in Bill's story where he talks about the essential requirements, and I don't mean to bounce this around.
Bounce
it. Let's bounce it.
Yeah.
They're similar, but not exactly the same to the essential requirements that we see at the very bottom of page 13. Very bottom of page 13. Sorry. Last paragraph. It says, my friend promised. By the way, as we're talking about a spiritual experience, I'm just going to take us on this journey. This is the promise that Abby Thatcher, oh goodness, thank you. Abby Thatcher made to Bill Wilson, my friend promised, but that same promise is made to me. It's made to me on page 60. Having had a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, if I do this work to the best of my ability, this experience will happen. What we're talking about in the appendices, will happen. My friend promised when these things were done, not when I was sitting on a 4th step or avoiding an amends, or you know what I mean? I stopped praying and meditating and taking inventory, you know what I mean? I don't need to work with others, I'm busy. No, when these things were done, like I'm actively working them as a way of life. I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. I love looking at this as a relationship. You don't have to. But that's something for me, because those of you who are married or in a relationship, you know it takes action on a daily basis for it to continue and to feel connected, right? And it says the elements of a way of living. This is a way of life. This is not a set it and forget it program. This is how I live my life, which answered all my problems, not just my drinking problem, not just my drug problem, not just the problem that brings us to this all-inclusive study today, all my problems. And these are the essential requirements. So I'm so excited about varieties of religious experience. I'm going to call everything that. In the appendix at the back of the book, the spiritual experience that we popped over from, these are similar, but not exactly the same to those. It says belief in the power of God, not belief in God, but belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility. So we don't have openness, we have humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. So there's a beautiful parallel, not a perfect parallel, but I need to have these things. And not just to establish, but establish and maintain. Just like I couldn't stay well on one drink, I need to continue to grow that experience. So going back to page 568, sorry, I bounce around. Back to 568, I want to talk about the Herbert Spencer quote.
Yes.
And what I will say first and foremost is that it is not a quote by Herbert Spencer. And if I didn't say that, Rob was going to be on it. He's got me. Like Rob is really like not just a fact checker for me, but I feel like he's the cat herder for me, trying to like keep me in line, which I mean, that deserves a medal because that's an impossible task. So the Herbert Spencer quote should actually be attributed to William Paley. He was an English clergyman, author, and lecturer. If this is helpful for you, he lived from 1743 to 1805. So to just kind of put his life, like when he was living, his time in context. And it's like, the appendix, they got two things wrong, two mistakes. Oh, I'm outraged. How could they possibly get that mistake in here? How could that have happened? Well, little fun fact about the history of AA. There was a gentleman by the name of Ray C. And his story was in the first edition of the book. And his story was called An Artist's Concept. And he was the gentleman, if you've seen some of the big book compendium, not like the flyers for each meeting, but the sort of theme is the what's called the circus cover book, which is the yellow and red, the vibrant. So he designed that cover. He was the artist that designed it. Now, if you've ever seen the Art Deco cover, where it's the like blue and there's a man walking in the bottle and it's this red lettering. I love the Art Deco style. So I mean, I loves me that style. But that was him who designed it. And so they took his story out of the first edition, but they kept that quote. And he was the one that made the mistake. And they didn't have Rob back then to fact check us. You know what I mean? So we kept the mistake, and now it's so thing we do it. So, and again, what is the principle which is bar against all information? So the idea that will keep me stuck, that keeps me unwilling to grow, here's the thing, that keeps me sick and dying of this illness. I'm translating it, this, not a direct translation, I'm translating it for us hanging out today, which is proof against all argument. So, well, I'm just going to argue and I'm not going to be able to hear or change my mind, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance, which cannot fail to keep me stuck where I'm at, drinking again, using again, is contempt prior to investigation. Contempt is, I know. Contempt is, I'm sure you're wrong. Contempt is, I'm not going to try. Contempt is, it couldn't possibly work for me. And that's before investigation. Investigating is that's kind of a joke. I'm like, one of the most common things I say as a sponsor is, that's okay. A sponsor will say, I don't want to do it. I don't like doing it. I'm afraid to do it. I don't think I need to do it. And I will say, that's okay. Do it anyways. That's my sponsorship style. Like, I'll meet you there. Hear you. Let's do it anyways. And I'll help you. I'm not a jerk about it. Like, I'll meet you there. And hold on, there's something in the chat where it was like, yeah, I'll read it. It says oh man, it's going to be hard for me to read quickly. The infidelity of the Gentile world, and the more especially of men of rank and learning in it, is resolved into principle, which in my judgment will account for the inefficacy of any argument or any evidence whatever. And then viz, I don't know what that means. Contempt prior to investigation. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. And so that idea of I know without investigating, without looking at it. And just before we pop back to, unless you'll have stuff you want to say, but this was a quote from it's quoted in Varieties of Religious Experiences. It's just a part of it that I felt called to read. And it says, because it feels like that's what we're here to do. It says, for when all is said and done, we are in the end absolutely dependent on the universe and into sacrifices and surrenders of some sort. Deliberately looked at and accepted, we are drawn and pressed as into our only permanent position of repose. And that's that relief. And so it's kind of like that idea that like when I'm here, and I know surrender is not in the big book, but capitulate is, so bear with me. That idea that what this thing is often many coming to the end of myself, coming to the end of myself. And then being crushed and imposed by coming to the end of myself and awakening to the unconditional love that is God, awakening to that spiritual awakening. And that's kind of been my spiritual journey. So I think that's all I wanted to take all of the time to say. Over to you, Summer.
Paige, that was excellent. You just covered everything and so detailed and awesome. So I'm just going to keep us moving, and we're going to go back to We Agnostics, page 47. We are on the third paragraph. So that was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has? I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes, but I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. So that was great news to us. Like what was great news to us? That on this simple cornerstone, a spiritual structure can be built, right? Like that is great news for us. Like and also that we just need to be willing to believe, and we need to be willing to believe, and what is the second one? I can't think right now. So we need to be willing to believe.
That power could relieve me of the
Yeah,
mental obsession. Yeah.
yeah, the mental obsession. So that is the good news for us, because we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we did certain things, like unless we took, unless we accepted faith on how someone else believed, or like whatever it was. Like we thought that there was these certain I guess prerequisites, or at least I did. I'm not even gonna say we, I did. I thought there was prerequisites, like something that I needed to accept in order to move on. But the news is simple, or the good news, great news is simple. And then also I love how it says, I wish I had, like how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has? Like, I'm sure it would work if I could believe like he does. If I had the faith of like blah blah, whoever it is, or someone, or Paige, then it would work for me, right? Like then it's going to work for me. But that's not how this works. We just need to accept this, be willing to believe. And once we've met those prerequisites, and we're in step 2, it's time to move on to step 3. And like we're going. Anyways, I'm like kind of stumbling over my words right now, so I'm going to ask you to go, Paige, because
Absolutely. No, and you were crushing it, because that's the thing. It's like, yeah, we see somebody who's like at the front of the room or on the
yeah,
Zoom screen, and it's like, man, and like here's the thing: when I got here and I heard people like me who were happy, I was like,
yeah,
oh, they're so full of themselves, and I was writing inventory on them later on, because I thought like I couldn't get there. But it's important for me to understand that the second step is not the finish line. It's not the finish line. I'm not having the spiritual experience at the second step. The second step is the starting blocks. I'm at the starting blocks of a lifelong race. It's a marathon it's an ultra marathon, those real long ones that I'm running it the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? And so when it talks about the many articles of faith, an article of faith is sort of the doctrines of a religion. So every religion is going to have these are our core principles, our core tenets. This is what we believe in this branch of Catholicism. These are the seven, I believe it's the 7 pillars of Islam. Like these are our core beliefs. And to join us, you have to accept and believe these things. And for here in 12 step, we just got to believe there could be a power. And that power is more powerful than my mental obsession. That's it. So I don't have to be like jazzercise about William James. I don't need to care anything about William Paley. I don't need to use ineffable, that word, ever in my life, ever again. I never need to think about it. We just need to start with, could there be a power? That's it. That's it. That's comforting. I don't need, and what I'm going to emphasize too is oftentimes I want to think it out here. Again, I can't get here. I can't get to God through here, through thinking about, through analyzing it, I can't get to that experience through there. Now we can use that to use logic of why it's more sane to believe than not to believe, but I cannot awaken spiritually through my intellect. I can't do it. If I could, I would. I tried, Yes, the book is not the treasure, it's the map. So yeah, like somebody like me who I can bounce around, that's probably undiagnosed ADHD. But I can quote things from the book, like I can do all these things. That me knowing it does not keep me sober. Me taking the actions that lets God work in my life, that's what keeps me sober. So this is just the start. So I think that's what I'll say about that. Over to you.
All right. Had to mute for a second because my kids are in the background. All right. So moving on, this will be our last paragraph, I think. All right. Let me see. Okay. Besides a seeming inability, bottom of page 47, to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. I'm sorry. Obstinacy is stubbornness, and sensitiveness. We are sensitive people, aren't we? All right. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into the state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. So we have to lay aside our old ideas, right? Put them aside and casting them aside. And isn't it funny that it says like we have to have the same open-mindedness that we did with other issues in our life, like so open-minded about, sure, I'll do this, but with that, nope, not gonna do that. And so I like chuckled when I read that the first time. And alcohol being the great persuader, I mean, it finally beat us into the state of reasonableness, finally got us, or not us, but me, to my knees, to the point where like I had to surrender. But God, God surrendered me. That's the way that I look at it anyways. Sometimes it was a tedious process, and we hope that no one else has to go through some of the same prejudices that we did. Prejudices, opinions formed without due knowledge or examination, bias, to cause someone to prejudge prematurely and irrationality. All right, Paige.
Absolutely. And just this isn't the place in the book where I normally talk about it, but I won't be here when we do. So it talks about, besides the seeming inability to accept much on faith, oftentimes we come to this thing 12 steps and say, I can't have faith. I can't have faith. Faith is not something I have in my life. Now, I'm going to throw this out as a show of hands. And you don't have to physically raise your hands. You can just nod along. But here's the thing. Anyone here ever taken a floor pill? If you're not sure what a floor pill is, that is a pill that you found on the floor. All I'm saying, yeah, you guys know, if you ever took a floor pill, you got faith. You know what I mean? It is not a depth of faith that lacks. It's the direction. You know what I'm saying? I have faith. Heck, listen, if you have anyone here ever taken a car floor pill, that's a pill they found on the floor of the car, man, I mean, you can make that amends. You can make that amends. I promise you. Car floor pill, you got it. Ain't no thing. You got that, right? I have faith. But yeah, I'm held back by my stubbornness. Now sensitive. Here's the thing, sensitive. Now it ruined my day when I was informed of this, so I'm here to ruin yours. Sensitive is a synonym for self-centered. You know? Rude. It is me taking something that's not about me and making it about me. You know what how dare they? Are they, like, I used to joke, I'm like, I'm sensitive. And then somebody said, Paige, that's a synonym for self-centered. I'm like, oh no, it's accurate. Called me out, ruined my day. And then and then even casual reference to spiritual things made us to bristle is to be filled within that antagonism, is that fight. I want to fight you. I want to argue. I'm sure that you're wrong. I'm just not open. I'm, that closed-minded. But here's what opens us up, right? And this is step one's job. This is alcoholism's job. This is addiction's job. This is compulsive overeating's job. This is the job of compulsive gambling. This is my illness's job, to beat me into a state of reasonableness. Because when I come to a place of, it is only when I come to a place of hopelessness, am I willing to accept the hope that's on offer? And that's a theme that I find in this book. I need to have that step one experience. Now we can help and supplement that with that information, but I've got to come to the end of myself. That I've been beat by this thing. And it's only when I've been beat by this thing that I'm willing to listen to those stupid happy jerks. And yeah, I love the idea of prejudice, is to have an old idea about an experience I've not yet had. You know what I'm saying? I'll tell you I don't like it. I'll tell you that's prejudice, but I've had no actual real experience with it. So if I'm here agnostic, I have not had an experience of God. And so I just need to lay that aside. If I've not worked the steps or done all the steps, I've not had an experience, lay that aside about what I think. Have a new experience. That's what I'm after. I will be quiet because we got a minute left. I am always impressed when I end on time. So over to you, Summer.
That was awesome, Paige. So I think we're gonna wrap it up. And gosh, Paige, I just want to thank you again. Like, you are just a plethora of an amazingness. Like, every time you break it down, like there's not much else to say. 'Cause you got it. I love it though. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you all. Welcome to everyone here that was here for the first time tonight. We hope you make it back next week. And next week, or in 2 weeks, we'll be having Nicoletta. We don't, more will be revealed about next week, but the week after will be Nicoletta, and then Kathy, and then Kurt Z. So we have a nice group of people, and we'd love to have you back. All right. Oh, thank you, Daniel. Thank you. That's nice of you. All right. Thank you all for being here, and I'm gonna end the recording oh, okay, there it is.